Okay. Yeah. Welcome everyone. And thank you, Henrique, for taking from your time. And thank you, Kai, for organizing this great webinar. We're very looking forward to it. Uh, I would just like forward to you, Henrique. Maybe you can do a short introduction on your research background and what's you've been working on, or maybe how you got into business model for LCA, and then you can get started with your presentation.
Okay, so I have so when I prepared this presentation, I was a little bit ambivalent of how to start because I've been talking about this topic for people in the LCA community, and then I'm also talking to people in the business model community, so these respective research communities, and it's very different how I need to introduce the topic and what they know and what they don't know. And again, with you, with systems and engineers, I was also a little bit uncertain. So I hope I kind of pinpoint it right. But we have a few questions moment in the end, so I guess we can do it there. There's a bit of a story to telling the development of business model LCA. And I will go into that partly, not extensively. And then, of course, I will introduce the method as such, with some case learnings and where we are research-wise. And then I had also this request on social dimensions, so we'll touch on that briefly towards the end. And as a general summary, so if you don't remember anything else, so this is what Business Model LCA does. It compares the environmental footprint of earning a certain amount of money with a business model. So you can earn the same amount to make the same amount of profit with a smaller or a bigger footprint. So, I mean, from a business perspective, the business models should be equivalent or can be seen modeled as equivalent, and then the company can decide whether they want to make that profit with a lower footprint or with the same profit as before. So that is basically what this approach, methodological approach, allows you to analyze. And compared to ordinary LCA, that is quite different because there you look at the product itself and you can see whether you can design this product or organize its industrial system in such a way that you achieve a smaller or a bigger footprint. But this really product versus as a sort of product comparison straight on. So that's quite different from business model LCA, but there are lots of similarities. There is an ordinary product LCA inside every business model LCA. So that is kind of the gist of the method and what sort of how you can sort of hang it onto your memory. And a little bit about myself, how I got to develop this method, because it was really not something I planned. It was nothing I had like funding for. It was really a long path of discovery and then a very immediate phase of doing something during COVID with a few colleagues. So it's basically skunk work, the development of this method. And the long history is I entered the field of LCA in 1991, which is now a very long time ago. And in the beginning, I did a lot of quantitative life cycle studies, but I got a little bit bored with that. I mean, one quantitative study after another is kind of, yeah, you start seeing patterns and similar things. And I went on for my PhD research. I wanted more to look into how LCA was being used in industries, in companies. What are they being used for? Was it decision making that everybody was talking about, or was it something else? And this is basically captured in the field that is called life cycle management. And then I switched slightly to not just look at the use of LCA, but looking at the actor networks that actually make up the product systems or the product change or product life cycles. And these are in some ways social life cycle studies, not necessarily social LCA, which is a social impact form of LCA analysis, but social life cycle studies. And this whole development by looking at the people side of life cycles allowed me to see LCAs and companies and products in a different way within a business context. And I've always done this research with the mind of, can we do LCA in such a way that it leads to environmental change and not LCA for the sake of LCA? And during this journey, I discovered the importance of business models, but I didn't do very much with that at the time, but it was, yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more. So this is basically my research career in a very short summary. And the book you see there is a textbook I wrote with a colleague, published in 2004. So it's already like more than 20 years old, but it's still being used because we focus not on the rules of LCA that you find in the standard, but on the logics and the principles for modeling. So you can sort of learn how to model yourself, and that's why it still works. So I don't know if I need to say much about conventional LCA, but maybe I will do that just to sort of give a short recap or orientation for some of you. So conventional LCA maps what is called the life cycle. I mean, it's called the life cycle because it was cradle to grave, and that's the life cycle. But it was a product system. And this is the case I will use continuously throughout this presentation with the jacket, because that's our first business model LCA study that we did with a real company. And so you map the product system for making this jacket, and then you basically look at all the emissions and the waste produced, the energy needed, and all the resources throughout the system, and you sum it up in relation to per jacket. So you need to scale the upstream and the downstream material flows in relation to how much do you actually need to make one jacket. That's how you typically do LCA. And then you can sort of translate these impact numbers into like environmental impact, like global warming or human health hazard. So you can sort of translate these inventory results to more impact assessment results. And there are a number of different methods for doing that, but that's the gist of LCA modeling. And although it started with mainly LCAs of packaging system and waste management, the real appeal of LCA was to use it for eco-design, and everybody thought in the beginning, okay, let's eco-design all the products, and that's how we will change the world. So we will get a greener world thanks to doing proper eco-design with LCA, and that has shifted over to LCA in technology development, but we also see a lot of LCA being used for market communication, as a basis for eco labels and environmental product declarations. So these are, I would say, the big fields of applications, and they are quite different in nature. But sort of the use of LCA has proliferated. So if it started with let's eco-design everything with LCA, it's kind of the theory of change is now more like let's do LCA everywhere, and that will lead to everything becoming greener and better. So that's the sort of the general idea within the LCA community, I would say. And the definition of LCA is often shown with this. So the LCA procedure, how you actually do the LCA, and that is mainly what is described in the LCA, in the ISO standard for LCA. It really describes these steps of how to perform the LCA, whereas most people actually would typically think of the LCA model, the material and energy flow model, to be more immediately recognized as what is the LCA. I mean, the LCA procedure is a fairly generic process model, but those steps are what are described in the LCA ISO standard. And if I started my research doing studies of the people side of conducting LCA studies and how they are used and applied or made sense of in companies, I switched after my PhD. I switched to studying the people side on the full product system. So that is again a different way of showing what I did for my research. And the people side in the life cycle model, I mean, that's a lot of big actor network with a lot of different actors with different interests and with different roles in the system. So that led me to study actor network theory. I mean, I studied a lot of social sciences to find an appropriate social science that I could marry with the life cycle modeling. And I ended up with actor network theory in the Latourian sense. And eventually, after more than 20 years of research, I managed to write this theoretical paper together with one of my PhD students. And I put forward this much more social material perspective on flows, because within our field, we think of flows as they just happen. But I mean, we wouldn't have a product flow if it weren't for the people organizing and passing things on. And if we want to understand what matters for environmental change, then we need to see what is the scope of action of the different actors, what are the tensions and controversies, and what is their information and knowledge and all these things. And what I saw when I studied this system, it was really like, yeah, these are production and consumption system. This is like supply and demand, you could also say. And everything, almost everything that matters here is, I mean, these are entities that are organized via the market and economic actors. And then I had all my colleagues pursuing environmental change via policy. And when I saw these very large international sprawling networks of production and consumption system, I mean, you really see the challenge of achieving something consistent with policy and all these things. So it became quite apparent to me that business models are what kind of governs these systems, and each and every company will have their own business model, and they make sure that those work. And that is, yeah, these are like the basic mechanisms for these production and consumption systems. So of course you also have consumer preferences and these kind of things, but there's so much organization to make the business models work. So after studying the people side of the life cycle, it was really apparent that, yeah, to work with the forces out there, we need to work with a business model. So I made that realization, but I didn't really act upon it at the time. So for the spark that led to the development of Business Model LCA came a little bit later. So let's go back to the big sustainability challenge. So the case for decoupling. And I had to use this justification when I was working with my colleagues, because they felt that working on business was something bad, because many sustainability people see companies as the evil, so they would prefer to work with policy for that reason. But they had to make a case for why it's worthwhile to work with the business aspect of things. And then what we see here is like the material extraction really follows GDP more than it follows population. So, and I mean, it's also, I mean, we have done some efforts on eco-efficiency, but some of those are being lost. So the material intensity of the GDP is again sort of nearing to what we had in 1980s. So the idea here, like LCA as usual with eco design, I mean, I couldn't see how that would be enough to achieve some meaningful or substantial change to this. And when I came across literature in the field of sociology of economics, I started to understand the link between the bigger picture and the sort of on the more detailed level. And in that field, they describe business models as the little engines making up the wider economy. So that became a very tangible take on how to approach decoupling in a very practical, down-to-earth way, because otherwise you talk about decoupling on the GDP level, but not within the business practice. And I mean, whenever you talk about things on the GDP level, to me, that is like sitting in a helicopter and having viewpoints of what is going on on the ground, and we need to find ways that actually work for those who are on the ground. And then business models really are the little engines that make up what then becomes the GDP. And then we can also think, okay, so if business models are the little engines, then we can think, okay, what are the consumer preferences? Well, they are the fuel of these little engines. And that is why I kind of came to this take, what was needed for Business Model LCA, that this is what I needed to compare. So I needed to figure out the relationship between the product system, which is what you have in the usual LCA, and the business model as such. So there is a relationship, but its relationship was not like immediately apparent. So this is how I solve it. So by studying a lot of management literature, and especially the literature on business and business models, it became clear that the product in itself is not the end in itself for a business. It's just a means for business. Whereas the means for business is like to be a viable and have a continuity with the business, and they can quickly replace one product with another product. So they do that constantly with like different product models and versions and generations, or they can even switch to another product. So products, I mean, in the world of LCA, we think the products as such as really the end and be all of what we are studying. But when you move to the business context, the products are just means. So there is a different focus on what is the aim of the system in a way. And I needed to consider that when I constructed Business Model LCA. And I mean, the way I usually describe this is with a small example. So I mean, with LCA, you can sort of eco-design a t-shirt so it has a very low footprint, and it will be like a very simple t-shirt. But you might end up not being able to sell just one of those. You probably need to sell a lot of those t-shirts for the business model to be viable. And then we don't exactly know what happens with the environmental impact if we sort of just analyze the one single product or product use. So and what are the consequences when you kind of scale it up like that, or ensure that you have a viable profit for your business model. So this is also, again, a different way of visualizing the difference between conventional product LCA and business model LCA. So the business model LCA captures some of the scale or amount of products needed for the business model to be viable. But it's not just multiplying the number of products, because you often have quite complicated product system that shift in various ways. So it's not just a simple multiplication. And I will show that with the continued case study. And in the center of an ordinary LCA, you have the functional unit, the function of the product. So you model everything in relation to the functional unit of the system, which is representative of the product itself. So it could be t-shirt itself, or t-shirt use, like number of days of wear or something like that. But it really centers on the function of the product. And here we need to think about function in a different way. So function of a business model is not the product in itself, but as I said before, it's really to provide a viable profit for the company. I mean, you have all the discussions on how much you should profit, but this is the profit or the surplus generated around the product. So the business of the t-shirt. So again, also not the profit of the company as a whole, if it has multiple products in its portfolio. So it's sort of the one product and the business around that product. And I mean, the case as such here, we can exemplify further. So here's a conventional LCA and then the procedure for LCA. And you would typically just look at environmental impacts per jacket. But how do we transform this so it instead shows the environmental impact of the business model of the jacket, or the business model for the jacket? And here our base case was a sales model that also had a repair service. And what we do when we do Business Model LCA, we change the functional unit to say what is the profit per a given time period for the jacket business. So there is still a relatedness to the jacket, but from a business perspective. And then the procedural steps are somewhat changed. I mean, we do a much more extensive goal and scope with describing the business models. And then we analytically describe all the relationship between the business model and the product system by really pinpointing the revenue and cost streams in the product lifecycle system. And then we have a much more structured interpretation step where we look at the various parameters, the business parameters, the technical product parameters, behavior parameters to see how they influence the overall results. And then we can ask this question that I started with: how can the company make the same profit but with a smaller footprint? And that is basically what is a form of decoupling. So we start with a conventional LCA, and in our jacket case, we actually had the LCA of the jacket of this Swedish company. But it's not really possible to see the company in that life cycle model. So we need to start to identify which of the steps in the conventional LCA actually are part of the company and the business model. So that's the first thing that we need to do. We need to identify where the business model sits. So we do that with some what we call an actor analysis. And the next step is then to identify how the business model ties to the steps in this life cycle. And I mean, the business model, a very simple way to understand it is sort of the structure of cost and revenue streams. But if you go to the business literature, they have lots of different ways of describing this. Sometimes it's just a plan. But when it comes into real practical life, I mean, it's really cost and revenue streams and how the revenue ensure there's a surplus over the cost. So it's not just costs. So here we had the two cases that we had. We had a sales model with a repair service, and then the company also had a rental model with second-hand sales. And because you have quite a different structure of the product system, it's not so easy to just sort of use a LCA and divide the business numbers with that. There's a lot more going on in terms of relationship and what influences cost and revenue flow. So it becomes a little bit more complicated, but not really complicated. It's just you need to be very systematic. So starting with a standard profit equation for any business model, you have the revenues minus the costs. And you have a number of different costs. You need to identify where all these costs and revenues happen in the life cycle model. So that is where we start the coupling part, so we can do analysis for decoupling. And I'm going to put out these. So we have some cost with procurement and warehouse storage, running the retail stores, doing some repairs. Here they didn't ask for any payment for the repairs. They just offer them for free. And then the only revenue they have is the selling of the jacket. And then we can very distinctly express the relationship between the cost and revenue streams to the life cycle material and energy flows. And I mean, at the point of sales, you have actually very simple, the number of jackets sales times the number of price of jackets. So I mean, what is in green is the financial information, and what is in blue is the conventional product LCA. So you can tie all these costs and revenues and express them in terms of the jacket system. And sometimes it's the jacket itself, and sometimes it's the store for selling the jacket, but you express that in the ways that are possible. So one has to be a little bit creative sometimes, because every company does accounting in their own way. So with the number of employees and their salaries per store, I mean, there was a certain size of the store, so number of jackets that they were operating. So you made these very various equations. So you end up with a long list of equations. Here we have a very few just because of the example, but you end up with quite a lot of different equations like this. And that's how you can really tie the business model to the product system model in a very analytically coherent way. And these are the equations we had for the jacket case in the sales case. And then there's one more table in that paper for the rental with secondhand sales. And the analysis is structured as such. I mean, you set a certain profit level per month. So we just set 320,000 Swedish kronor just to have something. I think this was discussed with the company. And then we want to know, okay, what is the relative environmental footprint for these two business models? So in the sales model, the number of jackets you sell is equal basically more or less to the number of jackets you produce. So that's kind of straightforward. But when you start renting out jackets, then how many times do you need to rent it out? And I mean, you also have like a second-hand sales tied to that. So it's not so straightforward how many jackets you actually need. I mean, how many do you need to supply to the stock every month? But you can calculate this with the help of the coupling equation and the information that you have. So we had the information about jacket price and the rental price and the standard rental periods, what they do with the jackets after every rental period and when they decide to sell them. And they had this idea, they had what they called the crispness factor. When the jacket did not feel crisp any longer, they would sort of remove them from the rental stock and sell them secondhand. So we did this for like the both systems, and you do a bit of number solving. So we needed to calculate the number of rental transactions, and with the equations, we ended up with this combination of equations. And it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's in a way quite simple elements to this. I mean, it shows that the number of needed rent for the number of needed rental transaction depend on the profit level pi for the rental model, and that is related to the rental price, and then jacket maintenance cost, and then jacket replacement rates and second-hand sales, and then the retail store costs. So that's how we could have calculate what would be an equivalent or necessary number of rental transactions needed to achieve the same profitability level. And this is the initial results that we got. So we needed to sell 200 jackets per month or have 1,100 rental transactions during that period, and add new or replace 28 jackets to the stock every month. And initially, this looks quite good. I mean, you don't need to produce the same number of jackets, so you probably have a much lower environmental footprint related to production of jackets. But you also have like the washing and these kind of things. So let's see how that influences the overall results. And this is what we saw. Here we used a weighted environmental impact method, so that combines environmental impact of climate change with acidification and tox and a lot of different environmental impacts. And rightly so, production was greatly reduced with the rental model. But what surprised us and also the company was how much the customer transports increased. So with the rental model, you induce a lot of customer transport to and from the shop every time they rent and return. And although we kind of modeled that sort of, we didn't have exact numbers, so we assumed a modal share for customer transport, some coming by car and some coming by public transport. And the company felt that this difference between the sales model and the rental model was not big enough, so they felt a little bit uncertain. So we went on to do the sensitivity analysis. So we started changing the numbers the modal share for the customer transport. And because we had the whole system of equation, we could start varying the parameters a little bit, and we did that in a systematic way, so we could see what mattered. So we varied business parameters like rental price, what happens if you increase or lower or change the second-hand sales, or you don't sell it off too soon, you sort of keep them on in rental circulation longer, change textile quality like technical product quality, and then behavior parameters like customer transportation. So we discovered that the business model LCA set sort of system of equation really worked almost like a simulation model, you could say. And compared to the baseline, so the baseline is the sales model. So we use that as, and then we change everything in relation and put the results, the sum of the results in relation to that. And the only thing that really had a really big difference is like, yeah, customers only drive car to the store or customer only use bike. So then that really mattered a lot for the overall results. Everything else matters to some extent, but how customers got to the shop was really, really important. And this led the company to reconsider how they offered their rental service. So instead of offering it in stores in inner city location, they started offering this more on resort locations where they would be using the jacket anyway, and that would reduce transportation and these kind of things. So this led to a re-evaluation from the company side on how to, yeah, it's a company with a very high environmental profile, so they felt that we want to be absolutely safe from anyone saying that there is some doubt about the environmental effect of what we are offering. So they really took the results quite seriously. So that's a very interesting, and to us, I mean, it was very hard to predict the overall environmental impact if it hadn't been for all these equations and the very systematic modeling. And we see this kind of novel insight in many of our cases. And by now, I mean, the jacket case was the very first case that we did during the pandemic. And then since then, we have completed, I would say, something around 10 cases, and of course, more are on the way. And they're of slightly different nature, these different case studies. I mean, here you have the jacket is the first, and then we have like these these reuse plastic cups, and we have a tool library, which is like the top pink box, medical, health devices like shower chairs and rollators, air purifier, turbocharger for the truck industry, remanufacturing business model. So we have sort of tested a few different cases. I mean, that is what we're doing. I mean, we're doing just case after case to learn how the method works, its strength and limitation, its applicability in the business context, how people make sense of the results and these kind of things. But also you have, yeah, okay, I don't know if I'll do this, like maybe skip this quickly, maybe if I come back to it. So when we started sorting out these cases, the first category you see there with the cups and the sharing tool sharing library, these are cases where we really were in contact with business managers. And in the second column, you see case studies where the whole case study was initiated by sustainability managers. And then we see a slightly different rhetoric or discussion around it. So the sustainability managers, they like to use these case studies for internal advocacy to get the interest or the attention of their business managers. And then we see also a number of cases like the tissue paper case there. I mean, companies have these services and they showcase them as sustainable not business model, but sustainable cases, but they haven't really built a business model around it. And we see this in a few cases, not just this one there. We're working on a shoe case at the moment where we see this as well happening. So there is a sort of a disconnect within the companies on what is considered of business interest and what is of sustainability. So these things are not completely organizationally integrated inside the companies. But the first category where we were in contact with the business managers, to me, those are very interesting, because then we were really in conversation with the business managers. And what we saw was that the sustainable business models are often not performing as well as we would have liked to see. And I mean, the jacket case was not like super bad, but it was like not as certain as the company wanted it to be. But with the cup case, it performs so badly that, but at least we can identify a lot of improvement opportunities. And what these cases all have in common is that they add a lot of extra activities and infrastructure. So they were designed with the idea of, let's do sharing, and that is enough to create a sustainable environmental nice performance. Or we do reusable cups, and the cups being reusable is the design idea, and that will ensure that we have a favorable environmental impact. And also the jacket with the rental case, rental is enough. And that is the idea of these business managers. But to get these rental or circular or business model in place, they need extra activities, they need extra infrastructure, and they often underestimate the environmental impact of these added activities and infrastructure. And it's like they have a very singular focus on the design idea, that is enough, and that we can show very clearly that is not enough. So we have come to call this thinking of as greenwashing, because they don't do greenwashing with malicious intent, but they really think that the design idea is good enough, and that it's so good that you actually don't really need to analyze or measure the environmental performance. So we often have to push a little bit to be allowed to do the environmental assessment. And when we do it, they often are surprised at what we show them, but they take it seriously enough, and then they start modifying how they do the distribution, or how they do price models and these kind of things. So they sort of do business model innovation, basically business model innovation for sustainability. And I think this is a very good thing. Whereas when we work with the sustainability managers, that's a very different story, when they're just trying to get the attention of their business managers, and then the business managers are a little bit they don't really see the need to sort of go into the nitty-gritty details of product systems and material and energy flows. So we are still working on the bridge between business and the environmental side. So what have some of our companies said? So this is from the Borg-Warner case that we did this spring. And I mean, it's always good when the companies say these things themselves. So this is straight from a quote what they wrote on LinkedIn. So Business Model LCA offers a more strategic lens than traditional LCA by linking environmental impact to business value. And they see it as a promising tool for developing sustainable business models. And again, these were like the sustainability champions in the company trying to get the attention or sort of make a case for remanufacturing within their company to make it to scale those initiatives. So this is exactly what we want to achieve with Business Model LCA. Touching upon social impact. So I mean, in the world of LCA, something called social LCA has been developed. And it's basically an LCA not of environmental impact, but of social impact. The trouble I have with that methodology is sort of what is a social impact? Because when you look at the system like this, you have a lot of things that are considered social. I mean, you have the social organizational interactions along the chain, and you have something called social value, which relates to the value of the product. And then you sort of have something else that is social impact. So what is social impact that is not related to the interactions or the social value? So these basic concepts are very poorly clarified. And then you could add like consequences and change and these kind of things on top of that. So there is something very fundamental with social LCA that is not really explicated. And the current methodology is very oriented toward, you could say, individualistic well-being. So things like social cohesion or collective resilience and these kind of things are not captured at the moment with the social LCA methodology. And a simple way to explain much of social LCA is you can see it as a form of CSR and looking for the CSR indicators downstream or upstream the system. So it becomes like an extension of CSR, but not really an assessment of social sustainability. So we have decided that we want to continue this work. So we want to use the systematic structure of LCA to clarify what is a social value and what is considered an impact and these kind of things. And when we go to the business model literature that speaks a lot on social value and social impacts, we find a very messy vocabulary or very messy terminology. So that is why we think we can use some of the systematic structure of LCA to bring some clarity and organization to the terminology. So we have planned some research in relation to the healthcare, because that could be a good way to really concretize some of the social different types of aspects and what is impact and what is value and what is interaction and not an impact and these kind of things. So that is all I can say on on the social impact and business models. Some summary slide here. We have found that business model LCA is feasible and it provides interesting results, and it's been that consistently through all the case studies we have done. Always unexpected relationship that matters more than you think, or vice versa. And what helps a lot is that you can actually start with an existing LCA and basically add the financial modeling to it. Sometimes you need to adjust and detail the existing LCA, but basically if you have an LCA, you can actually build on it and then get the business model LCA as well. From a business manager perspective, the sensitivity analysis is very, very useful. You can start thinking about different strategies for should we place a product on one market or another, and then you can sort of do a very structured analysis with the sensitivity analysis on that by changing price and cost levels and environmental impacts related to different countries, although it's the same product and the same business model in different countries. What we have noted is many LCA people have really hard time switching from product thinking to business thinking. I would say that most LCA people don't really understand business models. They understand product system and they think of user perspectives on products, but thinking about this from a business perspective is really, really difficult. So when we do the PhD course, we spend quite a lot of time on this particular aspect to sort of train the perspective switching. When it comes to business models, a so-called sustainable business model is not always better. I mean, so far the business model field has worked with a number of design principles and idea generation, but they have not been measuring or monitoring or validating the environmental performance of their business models. I mean, of course, that was difficult without the proper method for it, but most people have done ordinary product LCA and tried to deduce environmental performance on the business model level, but it's not so easy. And that is where we have spotted the green wishing phenomenon, so to say. And we don't only study sustainable business models, we can look at any business model, and we think that any business model can improve its environmental performance. But I have some hesitations as to what extent business managers are interested. I feel that they are very cautious and conservative. If they have a functioning business model, they are very protective of those. And many of our contacts are often coming from the sustainability managers rather than from business managers. Where are we going next with our research? We are exploring different types of application. We can do business model comparison. We can do business model innovation for sustainability. We can explore the environmental performance of different, let's say, market strategies, and so on and so forth. So we are kind of working our way through different types of applications for the methodology. But we also want to switch from a business level decoupling to seeing decoupling on a market level as well. So it's not just enough what one company does. Can we see those effects on the market level as well? What can the company do in terms of market shaping strategies to really reinforce the environmental improvements throughout the market in various ways? So we are collaborating with the Stockholm School of Economics for that. And then we want to work again on social impact to really bring clarity on all these different types of social dimensions around business models. So it's there's a lot to that field, and we need to take some better grip on that. And then we also work on the sense making, sort of how do business and sustainability managers make sense of the results that they see. So we are working with companies and workshops and following up and trying to understand how they understand what they are seeing. And then what I'm doing now, I'm trying to share the knowledge on Business Model LCA to various audiences. And this year has really been the first year when I've been doing a lot of these talks. I mean, our first paper was published in 2022. We did most of the work during COVID. And we got published in 2022, and we have built up a little bit of a group around me. And now, yeah, so we are quite excited to what next year brings, because this year has been a year of building up the group and then, yeah, talking. So I think this basically sums it up. We have those 3 publications that are actually published, and we have a number of publications in the pipeline. And the group around me, now I managed to get money for a postdoc, and she helps me build up this field. We have a doctoral student that started this year. And we have an external party in Luleå who employed one of our master's thesis students, who is now a doctoral student there. And then we have one of the PhD students who came to one of PhD courses, and we have that. So we meet online every Friday and we discuss progress and support each other. So basically this is the entire group working on Business Model LCA at the moment. But we are looking at how we can grow this in some sustainable way. And if you want to follow anything that we do, we try to have everything on our Twin Wins page on LinkedIn. So we try to post what's going on, activities and publications and project info, all in one location. And with that, that's sort of the sum of my presentation. I hope I didn't speak too long. So I wonder now how we do the questions. Do we have a format for that?
Yeah, I will take care of that for the moderation. But
Very
first of
good.
all, thank you very much. A very great presentation. We have 18 people here present, so we during the holidays time or before the holidays time.
Yeah.
So I think it resonated very well, and there are also lots of discussions.
Mm.
Yeah, so now we will jump to the Q&A,
Yeah.
and yeah, people will raise their hands, and then I will give them then the chance to ask the question, and then you can
Yeah.
answer it and so on. Yeah, you can also stop sharing the screen if you want, so that
Yeah,
we
I
can
can
see
do
each
that. That's
other. Yeah.
maybe good. Yes. That's
Yeah.
better. Very good.
Okay. Yeah, from my side, like I find it like very great, and I like your greenwashing
Concept.
term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because like I mean it's kind of sadly because most of people not only because they want or intend to do something sustainable that it means that it's really sustainable,
No.
and it really needs a lot of work, which is kind of yeah
Yeah.
already very discouraging for
Mm.
industries and so on because they want the easy solution. And when we talk about the business model, so most of the time companies will look at the product and change parts of the product and want to be sustainable, but that doesn't bring a lot of effects. You really need to look back to the business model, and if you change the business model, you're changing the whole company and the product and everything, and that's also a
No,
big
no,
change.
you do change the whole
Yeah,
industrial sort of the system tied to the product system. So,
yeah.
um, but yeah, so when we compare the environmental footprint of the business model, I mean, we're not checking the business as a whole or how the business is developing. It's really sort of, but it's a way of tying what is actually the environmental shadow of economic self-interest
Mm-hmm.
and to make that clear and to show also sort of the dynamics in the interactions on the product side and the business side.
Mm,
So, I mean, it's not the end all and be all for all these form of analysis, but in a way, I was surprised when we started this that hasn't anyone done this before because this should be
yeah.
such an obvious thing to work on. And then during COVID, I had a student visiting from Italy and she couldn't return to Italy. So she was stranded in Sweden basically. And we needed to have something to do. And I had the colleague who had asked me, is it possible to measure the environmental impact of a business model because there's so much hype about product service systems and I don't really
Mm,
trust it. So we needed to use our time constructively, and that's basically how the method developed.
mm,
And now that's why we also want to move to see how can we see things on the market level. So how do the environmental impacts translate when we sort of check on a higher level in a way?
mm,
But yeah, I mean, many when I talk to people in the business community, they immediately see how can we increase profit for the same environmental impact, and then I tell them, well, that's not really what I care about. Maybe that's up to you. I'm just showing that the point here was to reduce environmental impact and not to increase profitability. But they very quickly go into this mindset, so
mm,
they struggle with the perspective switching in a different way. So it's very clear that each community has its own like logics of what they work by. And when we had the first round table at Volvo, when it was good, the method allowed business managers and sustainability managers to come to the same table, and that was really good to have a conversation. But then they had very different idea of what was good for the company or good for the environment, and it was like quite animated, I would say. But they hadn't actually met to have these conversations before that. So to me, that was really like a very important step to get them together and start discussing these things. So yeah, so I don't think this is the end all and be all in terms of economics, and but it's really a way to for economic self-interest to see how they perform on what is an environmental common interest, and
mm,
those things are rarely tied in such strong way.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh,
Okay, so who got some question? You can just like raise your hand, preferably, and ask your question. I think Tom just put
Yeah,
something on the chat.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know where the hand is, but anyway,
you can
I
go on.
guess. All right, thanks.
Go
No,
ahead.
it's just this, I guess, as always. Where do you actually draw the system boundary? Because, are there any good rules for this? Because eventually you can, of course, include the whole world in this sense.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
so do you have any
We have two
tips or?
system boundaries here. I mean, we have the product system
Yeah.
boundary, so we follow the sort of
But
what.
there are a lot of enabling systems connected to even the
Yeah,
product,
yeah,
right?
no,
So
no.
there's,
So you can sort of be very detailed. So when we did the tool library, so the sharing cabinet and the IT system, because you needed to book your tool from the tool library. So when we did that, we actually modeled the user interface, or what is sort of because they had to develop all these new digital tools or digital interfaces for the booking themselves and the running of these systems. So we had all of that related to the tool cabinet. So that is really the usual LCA. So quite an extensive product system. And there's a lot of discussion in the LCA community. Should you use like capital investment, like those sorts of, do you also include the factory, building the factory and so on and so forth? Usually that contributes very little when you then look on the product level, but on some cases it really makes sense to have this more extensively modeled. And then on the business model side is really the cost and the revenue structure, the sort of the architecture of the business model. And that sits in one part of the life cycle for the company that you're looking at. And I think of it as a sort of a marionette doll system. You kind of have the financial model and it kind of pulls the strings on the product system in different ways. And of course, you have different companies doing that all along the life cycle. So we want to do studies on circular configurations. I mean, some companies do like their own circular business model, but often you have circular configuration where you have a lot of different companies in value networks. And then each of them need to make their business model work in this circular configuration. And then we were thinking that we could use the same material and energy flow modeling for the system, and then to move the business model modeling to the different actors in that circular configuration. But all those projects that we've been invited to, they often fail because one of the companies in that circular value network, they don't manage to get the business model working, and then the whole configuration doesn't work, and then we don't have a case. But yes, so yeah, it's important to understand that you actually look at the whole product system. And for the business model, you look at the company business model and you see its effect throughout the wider product system. And we use the general rules that we use in LCA for system boundaries, sort of what is related, what is the system that required to put this product on the market.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
energy systems, I mean, the part of the energy system that goes into those kind of things as well. So yeah, at least we have 30 years of experience there, how to do that part. So it's the financial part that is the new part.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Bruce has a question.
Great presentation. Thank you very much. And it's wonderful to hear that you're connecting it back to the business model in an organization. I guess the question that I have, I'm assuming the standard for LCA that you're talking about is out of the 14,000 series.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're using?
Yes,
Have you?
that's the standard one that people refer to as the standard.
Yeah. Have you looked at the way these standards have been embedded in the organizations through their environmental management systems and the connection of your business model to that and the possible integration to the quality management system where all the life cycles and product development processes should be happening?
Well,
Because those are where I
in an
live,
ideal
and
world, yes, that I could see that that would be the way to go, but the way the standard is used now is it's organized as a bit of the terminology. It's used a lot for to create comparable, especially for eco-labeling and environmental product declarations and product environmental footprints. Is really important to have like a harmonized methodological framework. I don't think it's, I mean, life cycle work and life cycle practices or activities, you do see that in various companies, but it's, I mean, I started studying that in the 90s, and I would still say it's, I wouldn't say experimental because that is not how it is, but it's not fully I mean, many companies do LCA, but I find that it kind of lives in a certain part of the company, not necessarily well aligned and coordinated with quality work. I mean, it really differs from company to company. And I see life cycle practitioners still advocating for their method inside the companies because LCA is so ambitious. It asks them to look way beyond this organizational boundaries. So many people who work with LCA are a little bit like internal entrepreneurs, I would say. And they are still finding their ways of making this work in the best way. And they don't directly work with business managers. They could work with the product developers or production development, but not necessarily with the business manager. So there is a sort of a separation between the sustainability world and the business side of things in the companies. And they struggle with the terminology. I mean, they often trained on sustainability, not necessarily on business thinking. So there is a relevance issue. How can they make themselves relevant in the business discourse in the company? And although they recognize the need for that business is important in the company, they don't exactly know how to make the bridge or the translation. And I mean, look at the world of LCA research. I mean, most of it is more and more studies and sometimes methodological reviews and analysis. But there is so little research that is actually on the practice of LCA, what it actually looks like in industry. It's like crazy how little that is to really understand the LCA in reality.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of companies that do claim to have certification to the 14001 and the quality management system, and they must be audited, and there must be data that we could look at by talking to some, like Airbus, for example, is one that I've been looking at, and Hewlett Packard. Recycle all my I've been recycling all my cartridges for printers for a long, long time.
Yeah, no. So
And
I
so
think
there
the
are
ISO standard
companies
is
that
really
are
it's a per LCA case study. It's not the corporate. It's per LCA study. It's not the corporate standard in that sense.
not sure I understand that. Maybe I can take this offline and talk to you
Yeah, we can
about this
continue the
because
conversation in a different way. But yeah,
because
it's
the main thing that you pointed out, and I think this is really important for product managers and product teams, is looking at the options. And every business case that I've been involved in has always had a number of options. And I think you laid out the option of just delivery of a product or the delivery and the rental of a product as another option. These are all really important to be able to bring into the business planning process. And I think this is there are a number of hooks that you could build on to do that and make sure that we cross the QMS, EMS boundary and make sure they're better integrated. So I'll take this offline with you if you'd like.
No, I think this is sort of where we put the emphasis on our doctoral education to sort of bridge it to different. So we have the PhD students also from the business fields here at the university and and the sustainability, and we put them in the same course, and we want to have this conversation going. And I try to introduce business planning to my LCA people, and then the realities of product systems to the business students. But it's a translation challenge.
Great. Well, I really like the work you've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those kind words.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other questions?
Sorry, I'm just going to follow up with a comment on what you just said about the training. So we do start seeing now, let's say, sustainability business trainings, but it's so new that obviously we can't wait for that to happen. I'm just saying they are graduating now, but they also are in a specific category for sure with respect to all of that. So, but it's starting, but
No,
too late
I
for
feel
everything we need to do.
I feel an immense need on this side. I mean, it has taken LCA about 30 years to get to the point where it is now. And I feel I cannot wait the same amount of time for the bridging to business. So I took this research to the New Business Model Conference. Was it 3 years ago? So that was like my first venture into that research community. And it's gotten, and now they say we need to bring this to the business community. And I mean, I've checked some of the courses on sustainable business models. So it's a lot about ideation and planning and business model canvas. But when it comes to actually validating those sustainable business models, they don't really have an approach. So I need to make a, to get this part of there. So I mean, I really switched my whole exchange network. So I used to be more with like the LCA community. Now I only talk to researchers in the business community, and that is a whole, it's a learning for me as well to get across to them. So, but if they are into sustainable business model, that's a much more feasible conversation than with the pure business model people. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the business community is a very good leverage point to
Yeah.
really address sustainability properly.
Yeah.
And especially when companies talk about, okay, what's the benefit from it? I mean, like you really need to integrate to the business model if you want to see a benefit there. So you have mentioned regarding like your research group, and I would like to ask you like, maybe if you would like to collaborate with us. So maybe I give you an overview of what we do, and then you can see if it's something interesting for you.
You wrote something about system dynamics models, and I mean, at the moment we are doing the modeling very much bottom up,
with OpenLCA or
basically in
something like that.
Excel, or I mean, we are considering ways of doing this. I mean, the current LCA softwares don't enable this kind of add-on, let's say. There is a software, I mean, it's not even a software, it's more like a programming language. I mean, there's something called Brightway that is a Python-based LCA environment. And we're thinking, okay, could we sort of integrate that into the activity browsers, which allows more like ready-made forms of analysis? But we're kind of playing around, and I've been thinking of using forms of system dynamics softwares where you can add the coupling equations in the relationships as a way of not having to do everything bottom up as we are doing now.
Yeah, I think definitely system dynamics will help to study the interrelationships between in your business perspective. But I think for detailed analysis, you will probably need to go back to an LCA model. Let me share shortly like my screen and then tell you a little bit of what we do at the working group.
Please do.
Okay. All right. I will leave only this one. Okay, I already used this one. Yeah, so we are from INCOSE, that's the International Council on Systems Engineering. And we also have other networks involved here. I will show you an overview later. Yeah, systems engineering. Did you already you said you also have systems engineering in your given course on systems engineering?
We have a master's program called Industrial Ecology, which is basically a sustainability systems engineering programs to our students at Chalmers.
Okay, and do you understand or define systems engineer as we do it at INCOSI as a
More or
transdisciplinary?
less, integrative is very much a part. You cannot have sustainability on its own. It needs to be integrated into various technical domains and other, sort of entire systems.
Okay.
Transdisciplinary, yes, absolutely. Multidisciplinary, that's how we teach it, and then they have to make it transdisciplinary. So I recognize this is a very familiar. There's a very
Okay.
familiar meaning to these words. Yes.
Okay, good. Then we are on the same page. Yeah, here are some motivation why we need the working group. I think we don't need to go through this. And so sustainability was identified as the first mega trend in the INCOSI Vision 2035 that's going to influence systems engineers. And yeah, so in this working group, we want to establish sustainability as a core concept in the systems engineering process, as it wasn't much considered before traditionally. And so yeah, our vision is that we have a finite earth or finite resources, and we want to live sustainably or flourish within this boundary. And yeah, that's what we are taking into account. And the working group is very new, so we were established at the middle of February of this year.
Oh.
Yeah, and yeah, so from our activities, we have this project called Sustainable Together, where we show how to transform conventional business model, enterprise, and products into sustainable one. So we are saying that sustainability is a holistic topic, and if you want to address it effectively, you really need to change the business model, the enterprise, and the products. And we are showing the hows, developing methodologies, tools, and so on to allow this or to support this transformation. And yeah, here is some other involvement like this Cascade project. It's in standardization projects on knowledge graphs, where we want to do an implementation of the digital product path using their technology. And then we have this monthly webinar series, which is also kind of a platform to bring other communities to show their work, and then we find ways to collaborate with them. And yeah, and then here we have the sustainability primer book. This is the systems engineering book of knowledge. It's probably also very interesting for your students. It's a very great, good resource for systems engineering that is open and accessible. Yeah, so to deep dive on the sustainable together, we have developed kind of generic approach to how to address sustainability. We said if you want to address it properly, you need to start by the mission of and the vision of the company. And when you do that, you will have to change your business model and also your operating model. And then from there, you change the enterprise architecture and then the product and so on. And then here we have the enabling systems, the life cycle stages, then the use, and here the circular economy strategies. Ideally, we want to eliminate waste. And this is the technical cycle. And then here we have the biological cycle, where we also want to look at and also these topics of regeneration. So we kind of trying to bring everything together, and we are also using systems thinking, system dynamics, digital engineering, life cycle assessments, or these circularity assessments and so on, and risk analysis. So that's why I think it's your work is very important, because this is already at the beginning of this transformation. It allows a verification or a validation of for the business model before diving into the other things. Yeah. And yeah, so this is our current network. We have the Cradle to Cradle NGO, Common Earth, who are also part of the network. And then we provide like a very nice open access course on climate change using systems thinking. Then we are also collaborating with the WFEO. So INCOSI has a working group there. This is like the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. And there they have like the UNESCO and all this global organization where they are trying to implement the sustainability development goals. And then we have the Net Positive Advisory Panel, which is part of the IEEE network, which is also a big network. And today we have also Micah, who is present. And then we have the flourishing business model. So we had Anthony Upward present the flourishing business model, and we are also connecting with his community. Yeah, and this is how our network is growing and growing, and we try to collaborate with them and develop solution and then make them open to the outside world. So if you are interested, I think we will be we already like Axel and me, we have developed like some tools on how to automate life cycle assessments, especially like together with the system models on how to directly like do life cycle assessments. And we'll be very much looking forward to work on the business model assessment and how to automate that. I think like, LCA, it's a lot of cumbersome work, like a lot of the process is just like time consuming, and we try to make it
Yes,
as easily accessible as
reality is
possible.
complex, and then you discover how complex it is when you map your system in LCA.
Yeah.
And then with sustainability or the environmental data is the data that is not well recorded in the companies. So
Yeah.
the economic data is a completely different thing, and the material functional data is again, but the environmental data is less, so it's very spread out, and takes time to collect it. Yeah.
Yeah. Kai, you have your hands up?
Yes, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit for starters. Just a quick comment on what Micah put in the chat as well. So with the work we do with Anthony, we use also the Future Fit assessment tools, and they come out of the work of Bob Willard, which Micah quoted with the link she puts there, and that's our webinar series in February. And it is a stringent tool to assess business activity across higher levels of sustainability. And that's my first comment. My second one is, hi, Maike, that we have, we're looking to program Anders Björn from the AESA out of the Industrial Ecology as well in March. So to continue this conversation and the approaches and his new methodology, I'm going maybe to put a link there as well.
The absolute sustainability.
But
stuff,
also PBL-LCA, what he calls this, is a planetary boundary, so integrating carrying capacities and at different scales is what he says. So macro, meso, micro likely. So it's very new work.
To bring the planetary levels down to the product
and
level or the company
which again
level,
is and it's close to the work we've been showcasing with our series with Bilbao's work on SDPIs, and it looks like Anders, because they are also connected. I know that because that's how I discovered it. That he sort of has a pattern which links to SDPIs in there. So I'm just saying we're not done here. We're still looking at plenty of things in the next couple of months, and I think there's tons of work with everything we've heard today. And that was a comment I wanted to make here to connect to
that's good. That's good. I also recently received a question from a PhD student in Austria who wanted to apply the absolute sustainability of the planetary bound framework impact assessment methodology onto Business Model LCA. So you actually reminded me that I should reply this PhD student before I leave today. So yes, and I see how those things actually could work together well, because it's a form of impact assessment method that we could use in the inventory stuff that we are using with Business Model LCA. So yes.
So I put the link to the Future Fit in here, which is our February session.
Yeah.
Mike, maybe you want to say something in a second too. And I wanted to finish by saying we also, and that's the comment I made also by what I added on the behavioral level, and that's where you ended your presentation as well, on the social and behavioral levels, which impact so much. The comment I made on sharing models we have in the behavior scheme, which actually reduce material lifetimes for products as well.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot going on that, and hopefully at the same time as when we have Anders, because they're both at DTU, I hope to have, and she just replied actually while we were in the session here, Daniela Pigoso, who works and has she has EU funding for what she calls a reboundless design theory. So I think there's tons to check out there, and she works also already at sufficiency business models, which we were also hyped up about. Like, your turn. You want to react? I can see that. Just
so
please go ahead.
When are we going to talk about sufficiency?
Now?
Like I mentioned it to a couple of folks in the last few days, and both of them came back to me. I never heard of this.
Really?
Right. Yeah, it just blew me, right? But yeah, but both in North America, okay?
Yeah, okay.
So it's an interesting.
But which still shouldn't be a case, because in the database I put up, for instance, you have a North American company which does socks which last over a lifetime, and that's a sufficiency principle. And there are lots of these, right? So that's a little bit what I'm. John left. It's what I was trying to say with this idea of folding, infinite movement in finite space. And apologies for my quoting it in the chat. I think there is a lot we can do, and this creative approach, think about socks for your life. And and they really last longer. It's not about, having the standard product and then more people use it. Obviously, it needs to be more sturdy, etc. So, and then it's how people react to it, and that they have to have a connection with it differently from a consumerist approach, I guess. Yeah. Anyhow, just opening
just
this.
Think about pantyhose. Just think about pantyhose, okay? Made to last 1 hour. And anyway, I was going to comment on Bob Willard's work. I first met him in 2005, so just over 20 years ago. And what impressed me most, I think, well, for one, he had message, which is great, but he brought one message very clearly to the table. And that was, if a business embarks on a philosophy, like a business approach, that is a sustainability with respect to environment, etc. Not business sustainability per se, but sustainability as we look at it in a holistic fashion, that it has a huge impact on the workforce within the company. And so when you talked about the social impact, it's not just the social impact outside the company. I think there's a huge potential of superb social impact inside the company. People want to work with a purpose.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think when it comes to social dimensions of LCA, people think first like social impact in a very social, human interrelational way, and meaning and these kind of things. But there is also another sort of social dimension to environmental problems. So we pursue things like justice and reduce crime that are not necessarily environmental. So there are both the social dimension of the environmental problems and all the other social things that we strive for in society. And when people talk about social LCA and social sustainability, these are so poorly defined areas, and you can see a lot of very diverging takes on how to approach these things. But I agree, meaning is very important, and I mean we live and operate in very complex systems, and we barely know where things on the food shelf is coming from. And that also, so I'm always surprised at how people, when they discover LCA, there is almost like an existential sigh of relief, because aha, now I can understand where things actually come from, and now I can understand like my provisioning in a way that I otherwise earlier couldn't really understand. And I find this very, I don't know, humbling to sort of, and sort of, it's a nice experience to see how people sort of react to LCA in this way.
And the other thing, though, is like it's hugely important for us to take it all the way into sustainable procurement and so on. Right? So this information sharing piece, so that we can actually make decisions based on good information, good data. That's I think where we have still a huge break right now. And we need to fill that gap so that we can make decisions based on a solid decision background. That's what I like to call it, for lack of a better word.
No, there's a lot of things that are on the to-do list.
Yeah, the question was always, okay, do I buy a new car or do I fix my old car? What does the LCA tell me? What is the impact? I mean, that question has been out there for 20 years.
It's been out there, and then you get into, you can sort of, you make your decision for yourself, but then okay, what are the repercussions on the economic system, and should have a service economy, or what does it do for employment if you sort of scale this to a higher level,
but
and so on
if
and
we
so
talk
forth.
social systems, it's also the question, you know, because should it be put down on the shoulders of the, in inverted commas, citizens, environmental, what was it called now, the last invention? I mean, that's another of those things which we really would be nice if we could sort of look at a more interlocking approach there. And I wanted to say, and I'm going to make the devil's advocate for Anthony, who couldn't be here today, and I'm sure he would have loved to join in on the social aspects, because he made the point to me recently where he said, well, I'm really an advocate for all these social aspects because nobody does this. Most people are doing nature, and that is the easy part, he says, right? So it very much resonates with which is what you've been just describing, Henrikke, and I think we're only at the beginning there, right?
We are, and I mean, I see my colleagues throwing themselves over doing social LCA. I mean, not to disparage them, but they are engineers trying to do social analysis without like good training in the social sciences. So it's a bit square kind of a method to it. But and those social scientists who have tried to join the field, they kind of withdraw because they think it's like too technocratic approach currently, and they give up on those interaction. But I really think we are just scratching the surface of understanding the systems through this social lens, this social dimension through a systemic lens.
And I want to make another comment because Hemza has put lots of collaboration with cooperatives and things like that there as well, which links back to what Mike has said and how people really want to, the impact internally, and how a different type of business which addresses this, whether be it B Corp or co-ops, right, is also something I think which needs to be looked at with respect to that. But coming back to what you just said, so what could this group do to sort of let's say, work at this difficult intersection between the social sciences around that and the engineers or the technical sides? What would you like to see there somewhere?
The multi-million-dollar question. I think we are very good in industry to think, okay, what is the business interest and what are the and sort of working along the logic of economic self-interest and these kind of thing. And I say, well, fine, but don't do it at the expense of the natural environment, let's say. So I'm not going to go all political on that side, but I think it's strong enough to say, yes, you do you, but don't do it at the expense of the environment or vulnerable parties and so on and so forth. you have to be a little bit more creative when you come up with your business ideas or solutions and so on and so forth. So to me, that is, it's like recognizing that there are different types of values at play here, and to identify what is part of what value system and what, and to, because I mean, we often have to handle a lot of different interests, and there's a lot of complexity handling that. So, but actually recognizing what is tied to like economic self-interest or product function and these kind of things, and what is related to common interest, that's like a ecosystem, vital ecosystems, like ecosystems with vitality, but also like societal issues, and to recognize that these interests are very different and they sometimes pull in different directions, and to handle that in a not either or way, but in a both and way.
Well, I have a question regarding that. Like I just like I mean, I had it like a little bit in my mind. It's like kind of something where we would be looking at. So is this the human side of sustainability, like how to drive a sustainable behavior? Did you also have a look into that? Is it also part of the social perspective,
Well,
would you say? Because it is kind of
I don't do consumer studies. I know people who do. But I have studied, I mean, before I went into sort of really centering on the business model, I did a lot of studies looking at the actor network and, let's say, controversies in these actor networks around sustainability, or matters of concerns and matters of fact, and how they sort of play out in the shaping of these product systems, like governance, how big companies try to influence the definition of what is considered sustainable for that product system and these kind of things. So it's not necessarily consumer behavior or these kind of things, although I think that is very important to understand that better. But when I studied these controversies, I mean, one case was on the, it's a very strange case study. So we are located on the west coast of Sweden, and one of our iconic dishes is the shrimp sandwich. So shrimp caught in the West Coast Sea here. And now for 10 years, our local shrimp has been red listed, but also at the same time, the industry managed to get it eco-labeled. So it's red listed on the IUCN list, not in the highest category, but still sort of noted. And then while that is the case, the industry manages to get it eco-labeled. And they did it as a response to people reacting to the WWF consumer guide, where they said, we have a difficult situation for the local shrimp, so we put it on the red list for consumers to not buy it. And this, the consumers adhered to this. They really stopped buying it because they, well, we need to take care of our local shrimp stock. We cannot let this be depleted. And even if industry, the local fish shops and the fish market and the auction, they reduce the prices, people will still not buy it. So they dump the prices and people will still not buy it. And then they started this process of getting the eco label for it, and they managed to get the eco label, and that was the situation for 10 years as like a frozen conflict. So that they really worked on taking control of what is considered sustainable. So you see a lot of these conflicts over what is considered sustainable, and a lot of different actions to mobilize different actors and alliances and eco labels, and maybe the whole situation arose because there was not enough trust in that the authorities doing the quotas were doing the job in the right way. So you have like a whole governance situation that is unclear and shifting, and people don't, so they listen maybe more to WWF than to the fisheries authorities, and then you have this evolving situation. And it's only like in the last year that the International Council for sort of ICES, it's called, they do like the scientific assessment of size of stocks and these kind of things, that they have reworked the stock assessment models for shrimp, and they have changed the quota recommendations. And now the eco-label has been withdrawn, so they cannot use the eco-label any longer. But it has taken 10 years of this very long and frozen conflict to reach to this point. So there's a very complex, I mean, people are aware and they care, but they're not always given the opportunities to live those things. So it's really what the companies also put on offer for them to be able to do sort of live out sort of the sustainability care that some of these consumers want to show. So companies sometimes say we only offer what customers want, but also they also shape what customers are allowed to get. So there's quite a complex relationship, and I think they are partially blind to how much they actually influence what customers or users can do.
Well, I mean, it's already bounded by the choices you have, and if it's always just the least best, and you cannot get what you really want, which is consumers really want something really, really good, and they would pay for it. Nobody tries it out, right? So that's where I usually.
You do see also. I mean, there are not only gloomy empirical evidence on environmental change and consumers, but you also have cases of consumer boycotts and how quickly companies suddenly change. So, I mean, I think there's a lot more to be done in terms of understanding consumer and market, how companies do market research on the on sustainability and these kind of things.
Thank you very much. Yeah, more things to do.
There's absolutely more things to do. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I think we already went above the time. So normally we always do an open end so that we get really time to talk about the technicalities. I don't see any questions. Then I would suggest that we close the session. A big thank you, Henrikke, for this great session. We will definitely get in touch again, as mentioned, we will work on doing the assessments of our own business model in this project and how to automate it, and then we can share the work or come back to you or so on. Yeah, thank you very much. If you want or would like to be included in the mailing list, as we have other webinars and so on, just let me know.
It would be great to be able to follow what you are doing, and I think it's also good for me to know in relation to the students in our program what's going on. And it's been a great conversation with you. So I'm sure we will have some further exchanges in the future. So this is certainly not a closed chapter.
Definitely. And thank you very much to Kai for organizing this great session. So Kai has been the mastermind behind the whole webinar series.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us also in the questions, and
thank you.
Enjoy your holidays.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.